Good morning. Brother Chad Long here from Delhi Baptist Church, and I've selected a passage today out of Job chapter 40. And, I typically make these videos in order to uplift people, encourage them, and help them with their day. But sometimes it's important to consider things that may not be fun to consider, but are important for our growth. They're important for us to recognize. And I like to think about these things early in the day. That way you can spend the rest of your day considering these things and come to the conclusions that are necessary for your growth. And, it's not always sunshine and roses and rainbows and all. There's a lot of really good stuff in the Bible, uplifting stuff, because God loves us. That's the whole point in Him sending His Son for us. He loves us. But because it is important as a Christian to grow in a relationship with God, we must consider other things than just the gospel message, which is beautiful. For instance, as a Christian, I know that I must suffer for the Lord. This life is full of suffering anyway because the world is full of wickedness. There's sin that has been in the world since the sin in the garden, and because of sin, there is a variety of suffering. We lose people that we care about. We get hurt, injured. People have been maimed and severely injured. Some have lost limbs. Some still have their limbs, but they can't use them. I mean, we suffer anyway. And I've always said, we suffer for our own foolishness and mistakes that we make, and sometimes we suffer for things that we had nothing to do with. But if we're going to suffer no matter which direction we go or how we turn, I would rather suffer for the Lord. At least then I'm suffering for a cause that I believe in and one that I know is worthwhile. So that's one thing that you learn that's not fun to learn, but true. When you tell your children about Jesus as little kids, you don't set them down and say, okay, now you're going to suffer in order to be a Christian. I mean, you don't tell them that because they're not old enough yet to completely understand it. It's not a matter of tricking them. You're giving them the good news. The good news is that even though we're sin sick and we're going to someday die, there is good news. And so I like to focus on the good, but I also want to learn from the things that maybe are difficult. So the passage today is in the midst of a conversation between Job and God. If you want to see the entire conversation, you can back up. God begins to answer in chapter 38. Job was running his head before that. And I don't really want to get into all of that. I mean, there's a lot of people put their focus on the beginning of the speech of the Lord, which is important, don't get me wrong. But I think we pretty well know that passage. I mean, the Lord answers out of the whirlwind and says, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man, and I demand an answer. Tell me where you were when I laid the foundations of the world." Now, we're familiar with all of that. But this conversation goes on. I mean, the Lord speaks for a while, and then He permits Job to speak, to answer for himself. And so we're going to look at this, okay? Chapter 40, verse 1. And I'm going somewhere with this. The Bible says, "Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer it." So it's a pretty straightforward question. He's been talking to him this whole time, and then he makes this statement. Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? In other words, you that have this problem with me, are you going to instruct me? That's what he's saying to him. He that reproveth God, let him answer it. You that thinks you're going to correct me, you answer. So I can just imagine, I wasn't there, but I can just imagine that God makes that statement and then He pauses long enough to see what Job has to say for himself. And I can just imagine a long and awkward silence where Job's got to figure out how he's going to answer. And one of the wisest things he says is something we need to come to grips with ourselves. He says, verse 3, "Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice but I will proceed no farther. So his statement is this: I recognize I am vile. I recognize that I am wicked. I recognize that nothing I can say is going to make up for the words I've already spoken and the ways that I've already defiled myself further, the ways I've already embarrassed myself by speaking of things I don't understand. And I think that's what this whole point was. I mean, Job initially had not done anything to bring about things that Satan put to him. But you don't necessarily have to do something wrong for bad to happen to you. In John chapter 9, a man was born blind. The Bible says he was born that way. And in case you're wondering why he was born that way, Jesus answers that. His disciples ask in John 9, who sinned? Was it this man or his parents? Why was this man born blind? And Jesus answered and said, neither. It wasn't this man's sin, nor his parents' sin. This man was born blind so that the works of God could be made manifest in him. And I'm not God, but based on what he said in other areas, I would argue that what happens to Job is so that the power of God can be made manifest in him. And it requires patience. It requires commitment. It requires a love for God that passes all understanding. You have to be able to love him no matter what happens. I've often wondered, what would I do if something happened to my wife and all my children? If something tragic happened, like what happened to Job, happened to me, how would I respond? Would I be able to respond at least half as well as Job did? So I'm not here to judge Job. I'm just telling you he's at a point now where in conversation with his friends that came to try to cheer him up, and they don't do a great job, but in the conversation with his friends, he makes these statements that he's done nothing wrong and he's undeserving of this. And then he goes on to talk about how things ought to be and how it ought to work and where he fits into all that. And he oversteps his bounds by basically judging God. And that's where he goes too far. He was doing all right, so he started running his mouth about God. And I will tell you, a healthy reverence of God is a good thing. If you lack that, that's something you should work on. So anyway, Job answers, says, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? Which is a good answer. I don't have an answer. I shouldn't be talking right now. That's what he's saying. He says, I will lay my hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, and it was actually more than once. But he's just saying, I've already spoken now, and I spoke before. I'm not talking no more. I'm done. I'm going to shut up now. That's what he's saying. He says, once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. So he admits, at least twice now, I've said enough. I'm saying nothing else. And then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind and said, gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. That means I'm going to demand an answer, and you answer me. Verse 8, wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? In other words, can you see where I've been wrong and where I should be corrected? And in your ability to condemn me, you will make yourself righteous. So are you ready and prepared to do that? He says, hast thou an arm like God, or canst thou thunder with a voice like him? Deck thyself now with majesty and excellency, and array thyself with glory and beauty. He basically says, if you are in a position to judge God, then you are God. And if you are God, dress like him, thunder like him, show that you're God. In fact, dress yourself up with glory and beauty that you're worthy of if you're God. Now, these are rhetorical statements, but that's what he says. Verse 11, cast abroad the rage of thy wrath, and behold, everyone that is proud, and obeys him. And he says, in other words, while you're judging me, judge all these wicked. Go ahead. Let's see you judge the wicked and the proud. Verse 12, look on everyone that is proud, bring him low, and tread down the wicked in their place, which is a continuation of what he's already said. Verse 13, hide them in the dust together, and bind their face in secret. Then will I also confess unto thee that thine own right hand can save thee. Now, in conclusion for this morning, what God is saying is, you can show not only where I'm wrong, where you've got more power, and ability and better judgment, and you can take care of these things I take care of. If you can do all of those things, then I will confess that you can save yourself and you don't need me. You're a God unto yourself, which is silly. I've never understood how Satan can get puffed up enough to think he's God. I can understand pride. I've been prideful. I can understand being a little haughty and arrogant. I've been haughty and arrogant. I can even understand thinking that you're pretty good, or that you're okay, or that you're something that's important. There are some of these pro athletes that get a little big for their britches and sometimes really think they're something. And I think we've all done that at times. But never in my most wild imagination have I ever considered myself able to save myself or above God. And I don't know how Satan can either. If you are created, then you cannot exceed your Creator. You can't. I don't know why anybody would think they could. So, with all that being said, what I hope to get out of this, since, like I told you, it's not the most encouraging message in the world, but I hope you'll get out of it, and what I'm going to take from it, is to recognize where I stand, to recognize who I serve, to put things into perspective. He's either God and deserves all of my love and reverence and respect and, yes, fear and obedience, or he's not and he doesn't. There's no two ways about it. You can't call him God on Sunday and then show him no reverence or respect the rest of the week. And we all mess up. But at the end of the day, I know who my Creator is. I know who's in control of all things. And I reverence him as God. I respect him as God. And the first thing I expect to do when face to face with my Lord and my God is I expect to fall down as dead on my face. That's it. I hope that wasn't necessary for anybody else. I mean, I think most people are already there. They understand that. But I hear these people walk around saying this and that about the man upstairs and the guy up yonder, and they got all these colloquialisms for the Lord that really just don't do him the proper justice and honor. So it does annoy me just a bit. But it's not about how I feel about it. I've got my own relationship to work on. I just wonder how God feels about that. But anyway, I hope that did something for you. Whether it did or not, I'm going to take something from it. I hope you guys do have a good day, and I hope you'll reflect all day long about who God is to you and how you can honor him during the day. All right, y'all have a good one. We'll see you, Lord willing, Sunday or in the air.